Hi, I'm Sam at jbugs.com. I'm going to adjust my clutch cable while you guys watch me install a clutch. In our last video, we got the engine compartment of our 1971 Super Beetle ready for an engine. That's the engine that we built over 2.5 years ago. After it was featured in its last video, we ran the engine for about 3 hours total. Then we pulled it apart down to the long block so we could retorque the cylinder heads and paint the engine tin and accessories. That was in July of 2019, and now, 2 years later, we'll finally get the engine reinstalled. We aren't going to go over the engine build in detail again, but we did film a time-lapse of the process so you can see the engine going back together. We went a little overboard with the reassembly, as we're going to have to pull the rear engine tin, pulley tin, and fan shroud hoses to install the engine, along with the oil filter and hoses. We'll also end up removing the carburetor, alternator pulley belt, and tensioner to clear the rear apron, but we wanted to show the completed engine out of the car. With the engine complete, we dropped the engine from the stand onto our engine dolly with the help of an assistant, so we can install the clutch. We bolt in a flywheel lock to keep the engine from turning over. Then we grease the pilot bearing inside the gland nut. The flywheel, pressure plate, and disc are cleaned to remove any oil, grease, debris, or dirt. The sprung stock replacement Vallejo clutch disc is set into the flywheel using a clutch alignment tool. Then, a stock replacement Sachs German pressure plate is loosely bolted in place. Since we have a late model transmission, our pressure plate doesn't have a centering ring like 1970 and earlier units. The ring is built into the throwout bearing on later models. The throwout bearing also has built-in clips and a centering ring to align it with the transmission. Once the pressure plate's loosely bolted in place, we can tighten the bolts, a little bit at a time, to depress the clutch evenly. You can see the fingers of the clutch flatten out as we tighten the pressure plate down. And once the pressure plate is fully seated evenly on the flywheel, the bolts are torqued down to about 20 foot-pounds. The alignment tool and the flywheel lock are removed. Then at the transmission, we'll pull the fill plug and pour in about 7 quarts of 85W90 gear oil. We do this while the car is on all 4 wheels and pour the oil in until it's level with the fill plug. Then the fill plug is threaded back in place. While we're working at the transmission, we'll get the new throwout bearing installed. Here we can see how the centering ring on the bearing keeps it aligned with the collar on the transmission. The collar and the arms of the throwout shaft are lightly greased. Then the bearing is set in place, and the clips are bent down and over the back of the arms to hold it in place. And we'll install a length of fuel hose with a filter onto the chassis steel line. We'll trim the hose as needed once the engine is installed in our next video. Thanks for watching. Click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, let us know if you have any questions in the comments below. And when you need parts for your vintage VW, stop by jbugs.com.